All right, so this is really fun. A lot of you probably won't know this. I just popped up in my notifications. The only reason I know, but there's these guys did a stream Saturday night. I'm making this on Sunday, analyzing the Flying Man. Yeah, Pine Creek's famous Flying Man. It was four Christians. I forget the name of the channel, and this afternoon, Nathan did a 5-hour stream. Yeah, Nathan did one of his 5-hour streams. And of course, it can't be an hour long. For an hour long, I'd do the whole hour, but it's 5 hours. And I didn't really watch all of it. I only watched tiny little bits here and there. I watched Pine Creek comes on, and then a couple of the Christians who made the original video called Taking on Pine Creek's Flying Man show up. I'm skipping ahead a lot because the first 45 minutes or so is just Nathan talking. I didn't really watch any of that yet. And then I'm just going to cut to where Pine Creek enters in because I don't really have very much time. I'm doing this mostly for fun, just to see what they talk about, see how they break it down. I got about maybe a half hour to an hour before my wife comes home. So if it were an hour long, I'd analyze the whole hour, but it's 5 hours long. And, I'm just jumping in about an hour and 20 minutes in. Let me see if that's right. Where am I jumping in?
Now, Exploring Reality, do you believe Jesus?
There's Pine Creek Doug. There he is, the man himself. I'm jumping in about an hour or so in because I want to catch it. I want to try and catch it where they come on, but I think it may not be far enough. So I might have to skip ahead. Well, let's listen in and see how it goes. Right now, they are at Pine Creek. I am analyzing Pine Creek as he analyzes people analyzing Pine Creek. If you doesn't get any more meta than that, kids.
Jesus rose from the dead based on that piece of evidence alone. How about you in philosophy?
I watched they did an analysis of Pine Creek's Flying Man routine. I watched about an hour of their video. It's okay. They don't get to the core objection. The core objection eventually Pine Creek is eventually going to have to deal with. See, to be fair to Pine Creek, before I start this off, there are two tiers of atheists. They're the really big influencers like Matt Dillahunty in our space. Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Ra, Seth Andrews. I would put Shannon probably in there. She's sort of an A-lister. Matt, maybe Anthony Magnabosco. And then there's the up-and-coming people. Apologia, Pine Creek, yada, yada. Of the up-and-coming people, then the content creators are in that group, like Vice Rhino and all those, a whole bunch of people who stream videos. Of the reason why I paid attention to Pine Creek at all, of the people in the up-and-coming group, he's the only one who can put points on the board. Now, to be fair, he does have original ideas. I mean, his thought experiments, as far as I can tell, they're his own, so they come from him, which means he's innovative and original. That's why you kind of have to pay attention to him a little. Like if you had a kid who was coming up with thought experiments, you'd be like, hey, here's some books, read some philosophy, get to know, you'd be challenging him to go higher. You'd pay attention to him. It's like, hey, this kid's gifted and talented. On the downside, okay, dry apologists, there's a couple of people on the Christian side who come up with original arguments too. Dry apologist, Christian idealism, a bunch of others. I think Inspiring Philosophy, Johann and Rotz. Looks like Phil's going to start doing it. Phil, get to work on those, arguments for idealism. On the downside of Pine Creek is the dry apologist will construct an argument and then immediately think of objections and counter arguments. Pine Creek never seems to do that at all. He never seems to even notice the potential counter arguments. So as far as he's concerned, his thought experiments do exactly what they're supposed to do. They show exactly what they're supposed to do. And this is the first time this is the first time it ever popped up in my notifications that any Christians have tried to analyze the mechanisms of the Flying Man. Now, I've analyzed it briefly in a video or two when he debated Trent Horn. I think I went into a brief spiel on the Flying Man. If it comes up in here, I will tell you my critical analysis of it. My critical analysis of it is spot on. Eventually, he's going to have to deal with my analysis of it because it's the truth. But I don't even know if he probably didn't watch that video. So let's let me let these two talk, and then we'll take it from there. But I'm mostly doing this for fun. I watched their video for fun. Pinecreek's Flying Man. Oh, how interesting. I don't really watch that much Pine Creek these days. I watched he did a thing with this Asian kid, Nathan. I watched that. I may do a breakdown of that because they would be very illuminating. That's about it. That's all I've watched over the last few months. Not that many. I watched more of him a year or two ago because I had to unpack the mechanism. How is this guy, conquering, collecting heads for the kingdom of darkness at all? How is this guy being effective at all? And then once I figured out the methodology, it's pretty straightforward. You don't really have to think about it all that much past that point. So here we go.
For you, how about you, Tim? How about you, Caleb? Really, you would or you wouldn't? Like, I honestly don't know how they would answer that, because if they answer no, that's not enough. Why isn't it enough? Because, well, they could be lying, Doug. They could be mistaken. Yes. Now, what's more probable?
I was looking at neutral witnesses there and thinking of, like the vast majority of the apostles giving up their lives and their livelihoods to follow a guy called Jesus, who they think is going to be the political Messiah, and then he gets crucified on a cross. It's like, yeah, that's a great neutral position from which to evaluate any evidence from.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have,
Nathan has an operating theory that he's used. It's somewhat plausible, They all thought Jesus was going to be a great political leader. He's going to be the new Messiah. He's going to usher in. There's truth in that, according to the scripture, that people didn't quite recognize who Jesus was because they were expecting, a warrior and not some hippie dude saying everybody love everybody. They were expecting, a great political leader to lead them to overthrow Rome. So when he died on the cross, Nathan's theory is, pretty sure this is it. It's traumatic. So they came up with, in their trauma, maybe, I don't remember the exact details. Maybe in their trauma, they imagined a risen figure. But the point is, the reason why the atheist, the naturalist, is always going to search for alternative explanations that are, by definition, this is why I started latching on to presuppositional apologetics to begin with, because the presuppositions are the entirety of the ballgame. Okay, the naturalistic explanations aren't that great, but they're by definition 100 times more plausible to Nathan and Pine Creek. Why? Because in their presuppositions about the world, I guess Nathan's not a Christian these days. I don't really know where he's at. He changes pretty much, but from this video, from how I'm watching the past couple of days, I'm gathering he's back in the atheist camp. I'll try to keep it to Pine Creek. A miracle, by definition, does not occur. So the burden of justification to get him to go, yes, a miracle happened, has got to be really, 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 really high. And the actual evidence for the resurrection is it's written in a book. That's why it's not that great of an argument. It's okay, but it's not as bad as Pine Creek says. In order for Pine Creek to try and debunk the argument, he's got to do a special sauce routine where he once again puts himself in the driver's seat, asks all the questions. Okay, you're already cheating at that point. When he did just a normal debate with Trent Horn, everybody saw it, right? A draw. No, Trent Horn didn't score points against Pine Creek. Pine Creek didn't score points against Trent Horn. Anybody who tells you otherwise isn't telling you the truth. It's a draw. Pine Creek, stripped of his methodology, wherein he gets to ask you all the questions and lead you to the weakest part of your worldview and then jujitsu you. Short of his methodology, he's no better at putting points on the board for atheism than anybody else. Creek can't do it. So the real thing, Pine Creek, if you want to be great, okay, and I want you to be great, I want you to be really good, I want you to be as good as you can possibly be, you got to be able to put points on the board without you leading the person to your foregone conclusions. I get to ask all the questions and lead you to, you got to do it absent that, in just a debate where it's on equal footing, you and the other person on equal footing. You ask them questions, they ask you questions. And so far, you can't do it in that environment at all. You didn't put any points on the board against Trent. So
this desire for it to be true, or desire for your life to be different under the thumb of the Romans, it's expected for maybe some people to write that Jesus rose from the dead when really he didn't. right? For some,
No. Is that right? It's expected for Jesus to have risen, to people to think he rose from the dead. I guess I'll fine. I'll give you fine.
type of greater good argument.
Yeah, that's one explanation as well, definitely, for sure. I like the fact that apologists always emphasize, though, that like how unique and special Jesus is, because they'll say, look, the Jesus followers, they just didn't get it. They thought he was going to bring in.
You know, Nathan does this a lot. Pinecreek does this. Nathan does it a lot, but this is very common. They hear 2 or 3 apologists do something and they generalize to all apologists. Everything that he's going to say apologists do, I don't do. Never done. Don't do it all. I don't even run the resurrection argument. Why? Because I don't think it's a great argument. Why? Because Pinecreek, by definition, is going to find a naturalistic explanation more plausible than a miracle. But so that's why, so he generalizes all apologists do this. And no, that's just not true. You know, it's just not true. The 3 or 4 you watched last week did it. And then you say, oh, look, apologists do this.
The political kingdom. And then but then when he's crucified, it's like, but that sets them up perfectly, these guys who have given up everything and have made this prediction, to be in this state of cognitive dissonance where they're going to like come up with a whole believe anything anyone tells them, right, to justify why they.
Okay, that's not very plausible right there. People don't get traumatized and then are willing to believe anything anybody tells them. Maybe you said that stronger than you meant it, but that's not that great of an explanation. But here, the reason why this doesn't really work is because a naturalistic explanation, talk to deconverted man about this, even a wildly implausible naturalistic explanation that doesn't entail a miracle is 100 times more plausible to deconverted man than a miracle. So the first order of business is demonstrating to a naturalist or a atheist that a miracle can in fact occur. The reason why Pinecreek's Doug analogy isn't all that great is because it's not properly analogous. He plugs in only the facts, as if the facts alone add up to, that's why I believe in a resurrection. It's not. The reason why I believe in a resurrection and most Christians believe is that they are starting from a presupposition wherein they believe in a being that has awesome power. And all Christians believe in that being. All Christians pray. And every Christian basically on their way to work and they're late for work. Almost every Christian would do something like this. They're late for work and they don't want to be caught because they almost got caught last time. Please don't let my boss be there. Please don't let my boss be at work yet. Please. And they'll literally petition the Lord. And in that moment, may actually believe that God could have the boss, forget his something and turn around. So in every Christian believes in that, in a being that is awesomely powerful to some degree or another. A resurrection isn't all that heavy of a lift with that as your starting point. And he never plugs in the actual thing that produces the belief to make it properly analogous. So he compares apples to things somewhat like apples. The evidence, the compilation of the evidence is not what makes people believe in a resurrection. He is correct about that. So the first order of business I would agree to right from the start. It's not a collection of material facts. And what the Christians call material facts to the atheist are things written in a book. It's not good evidence to an atheist, by definition. Correct? I mean, you if you're a Christian apologist, you want to be effective, you've got to start thinking how the atheist sees things. To Pinecreek Doug, every piece of evidence for the resurrection is what? Something written in the Bible. So something written in the book? Of course, that's not good enough evidence for him. He doesn't believe in miracles at all. At all. How is he possibly going to believe in a miracle? Now, I get it. You're not trying to convince Doug. You're trying to present the case. And that's where the atheist has got to recognize that someone like Trent Horn makes about as compelling a case for the evidentiary warrant for a resurrection as can be made. Christian finds it compelling and convincing. Why? Because we start with the presupposition that God exists and God is awesomely powerful. If I pray to God to, my kid gets in a car accident and I pray to God to find a good doctor for my kid, that's as implausible to an atheist as a resurrection. I am asking to God to intervene supernaturally in ways that are literally literally impossible in the here and now. Okay. That's as implausible to an atheist as a resurrection. Christians do that every single day of their life. I do that every single day of my life. And I've had what I honestly believe are really convincing answers about stuff like that. Really compelling, really convincing ones. So a resurrection ain't that heavy of a lift in terms of plausibility. It's not even close. And I don't understand why Pinecreek Doug doesn't get that. The part of the problem with Pinecreek Doug is he never actually thinks of counter arguments to his arguments. He's got 3 or 4 halfway decent hypotheticals, okay? But they all survive on gimmicky. A really good argument stands or falls based on the integrity of the argumentation alone. You could write it down on Twitter and put it out there. You can't do that with the Flying Man. Why? Because people will see the holes in it immediately. It's not properly analogous. The things that actually produce belief in the Christian are not analogically there in his Flying Man. He's only listing facts from a book, as if that's the I became a Christian because I had a really powerful religious experience that was 100% compelling and real to me. Didn't become a Christian that night. Since that day, I had manifold thousands of those experiences, to the multitude, thousands. Have them every day of my life. Okay. I started believing in God about a year into my Christian walk, started becoming a really committed Christian. I didn't know any of these arguments about the resurrection. I didn't know any of them. I didn't know 500 this, or didn't know any of them. It's not why people believe in the resurrection. So the whole Flying Man thing is flawed. It's not why people believe. It is not properly analogous. It is not comparing apples to apples and getting at why people actually believe. And it's really obviously so, Doug. If you're listening, if you want to really get good at this stuff, you gotta have to process in criticisms. You never think of you never think of the counter to your arguments at all. It's first order business. Dry apologist comes up with the arguments for God, then thinks of the objections. You never think of the objections. And you have to think of the strongest possible objections you can think of. You never do.
They left their families and their jobs and things like that.
Do you have Exploring Reality's Twitter or any? I don't. Or Caleb, if you're listening, come on in.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm trying to catch. There's a fun part where Caleb comes in. Not even sure if I'm close yet. Camille Greger's going to come on and they're going to chat. I've only watched maybe 20 minutes of this total. Nathan puts out content that's like 5-10 hours long. I mean, I don't understand who's got time to watch these things. How does he even have time to participate in this? I didn't have 5 hours to spend on Sunday with, making a stream
on Facebook, which isn't working for me. But I'll put the join link in the chat, and if anyone incorrect joins, I
would love to play in the sandbox with Tim.
Was that that sounded a little weird?
We would have a lot of fun in that sandbox.
Is he hitting on him? What's going on there, Pinecreek?
Okay, let's play this.
Even though he's philosophically minded.
Later, that's probably not the best kind of evidence. We went local in both location transmission, so again, close up to the eyewitnesses as possible. It didn't occur so fast that the details could be misremembered. So if it happened quickly, we know that memory can be faulty with car accidents if it happens really fast, or a bank robbery or something.
Okay, so this might be a little confusing for you playing along at home. That's the original video where they analyzed Pinecreek. I guess Nathan's playing it fast. That's Caleb right there talking.
But if it's something like, I spent 40 days with my best friend and we had lunch and he had been dead 3 days before, it's hard to misremember that, honestly, like maybe small details. But so it would depend on what exact kind of event it is.
That is not true at all. People have false memories of of their father. So in the Carol Tavris's book, Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, she talks about one renowned memory researcher who had a false memory of her father giving her some life advice and them going out for a meal together, right? Which she then later found out was actually a family friend who took her out. And because her father had died of cancer, she came to distort this memory in such a way that she formed the belief that it was with her father. So that sort of thing happens all the time.
Say it happens all the time. That sounds like a stretch. I'm almost positive that has never happened to me in my life, that I'm not remembering things that are, it's possible that I've fudged some of the details over the years, but I generally have a really good long-term memory. People probably distort memories over the years, sure, but literally remember things differently, that happens all the time. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't think he's really saying that, though. He's saying it's hard to misremember someone just being there for you for 40 days.
Right. That's a really big general thing. Somebody shows up at your house for 40 days. You can't misremember that. But, you know, this is where none of this is real evidence to atheists. Okay. All of this is still from the Bible. None of that is real evidence to atheists. If you want to get an atheist believing in a miracle, you got a present tense, documentation, things that can't be faked. There's a little part that I caught where Pinecreek starts saying to Caleb, this is what would constitute a miracle. And his bar is a little bit too high, but it's basically correct. You know, something that can't be faked, where like a prophetic miracle, the guy has to ahead of time say, Pinecreek at such and such a day, this is going to happen, you know, prepare it now at this time, something that can't be faked and can't be misremembered. That's what an atheist is talking about when they're talking about enough evidence to believe a miracle. There has to be no other option. And a written in the Bible is not enough, even though it's pretty compelling evidentiary justification as written. It's not enough to move an atheist, I don't think. Is that right, Pinecreek? I don't think it's enough to move an atheist.
You could hard, maybe. I'm honestly not sure. The state of memory research is like people frequently come to believe all sorts of weird things in their past.
I know, but
like systematic, like that they were systematically raped through years of high school by like satanic pedophile rings. So much false like memory recollection around that stuff.
I know, but think about pick one of your friends, and one of your friends has
right. But those things don't just happen, Nathan. I don't have all these weird false memories from my life. Those are associated with trauma as a defense mechanism. Usually when things are really distorted and weird like that, there's a reason for it. It doesn't just happen. Now, I'm not really sure what they're exactly talking about. So maybe it's appropriate to the context. I guess it's appropriate to the context for his argument, because I think his argument is that they were traumatized. I mean, I guess it's a halfway decent explanation. They're traumatized because their savior gets killed in this really traumatic way. So it's possible that there's some sort of, I guess it's more plausible to Pinecreek than rose from the dead. It's more plausible to a Christian rose from the dead. Why? Because we presuppose a being of awesome power, and it's the centerpiece miracle of Christianity. That's why. It's not because of, whatever facts are being compiled by the flying man. You find a way to plug that into the flying man analogy, and then it's properly analogous. Except the problem is, then people are going to go, yeah, I believe in the flying man. Find an appropriate thing that could make the flying man fly. Like there's a machine back then. There's rumored to be a machine that could make a man fly. And I go to a church one day, or a flying man institute. So here's some properly analogous things that aren't in flying man. There's a shrine to the flying man. There's 3 shrines to the flying man in every single town in the United States, because there are 3 shrines to Christianity, every single town in the United States. That automatically, by definition, makes the flying man more plausible. Does it not? Yes. Then I go to one of those institutions where they believe in the flying man, and they let me in on a secret. There's rumored to be a machine that enabled the man to fly. Then one day, one of these people, you understand where I'm going with this? To make it properly analogous, it actually becomes really plausible. And he leaves out all of the things that would make it analogous, so that you're comparing apples to apples. He compares apples to oranges, and it's a good gimmick, because he's using it's a good argument against the standard Christian argument. It shows you why the standard Christian argument for the resurrection isn't good enough. Okay, it's good for that, but it's not a good analogy. Why? Because it leaves out the things that are actually occurring in Christianity that are more important to the production of belief than the facts in the Bible, facts written down in the Bible. Hello? Did I speak rocket? Did I speak Chinese? It's really obvious, guys. What I just said is really obvious. Like so obvious, the flying man will not survive unless you make it properly analogous. Just because dopey people go, oh, wow, you're nailing it with the flying man. Do the flying man, Doug. Just the fact that you're asking all the questions, okay, that's automatically cheating. It's automatically cheating. When you didn't ask all the questions, you were not on sure footing. You couldn't move a play into, you couldn't bring a play into Trent Horn. Why? Because you're not asking all the questions. He gets to ask some.
It's just not you as a.
Come on, guys, work with me. I just told you the truth. If you can't see it based off of what I just told you, that's on you. Okay, the flying man is halfway decent argument against the apologetic, but it is not properly analogous at all. The things that produce Christian belief are not there in the analogy. You have to compare apples to apples, not apples to things somewhat like apples that Christians think are apples, apples to apples. What is the thing that produces Christian belief? And look at the actual evidentiary warrant. So is there anything in the I mean, I haven't heard the Flying Man in 2 years, I don't think. I barely listened to it. So maybe he plugged in some things that are properly analogous, but I sincerely doubt it. Why? Because Pinecreek doesn't update his arguments. He doesn't listen to the counter. He doesn't think of the counter objections on his own. He could make really good arguments, but he doesn't actually think them through. You have to think of the counter objections, Pinecreek, or it's not a good argument. Has to be able to stand on its own. Can't just be something you get to bring up with ideal circumstances with weak people. Okay, then it's not a really good argument. Then it's a weak argument that you're cheating with.
Brandon, 12, 11 others. And for the past 20 years, you've done stuff together. It's pretty hard to say that you and the 11 others, that was a false memory of you going bowling that one night or whatever. It doesn't. And I think that's what they're saying. But I would reply to that as that this, now before the theists get their pants knocked off, this is propaganda. This never happened.
Wow.
Right? There was no Jesus walking and talking and eating fish for 40 days after being killed.
Right. You see the root of, do you see the core problem? You're trying to say that the evidence in the Bible is good enough to prove the resurrection to someone who doesn't believe almost any of the Bible at all. You get it now? You see why it's not that great of an argument? Do you get it now? Do you see what he said? He just dismissed almost the entirety of the content of the Bible. But you're going to use the Bible to prove the resurrection to Pinecreek Doug? It's not going to work. He has to be convinced that miracles can occur first. And the only way you're going to do that is a miracle in the here and now that he has, probably wants too high a proof, sufficient evidentiary justification for.
This is people writing that it happened when it didn't. Now, what's your evidence for this, Doug? Is that, they'll say, well, isn't it more likely and expected even that these would be written about and it not happening than a man actually rising from the dead? Right, Camille?
Yeah, hi. So I'm starting to change how I approach the question of the resurrection, because a lot of people talk about, when they talk about it, they talk about other instances of resurrections, maybe resurrections happening today. They talk about faulty memories. They talk about Jesus's followers trying to overcome some kind of cognitive dissonance about him not being the Messiah that was expected. But more and more I read about the religions in the Mediterranean world at the time, the more I think that what is being claimed about Jesus and what happened to him after he died was just a completely normal component of religious thought. And the only difference is that early Christians decided to call it a resurrection. But if you actually think about the...
Okay, so that's semi-plausible. I don't know if everybody caught that. What he's saying is that there's an archetypal, this is almost Peterson-esque, but this doesn't actually... this can actually be used in favor of Christianity too. That's the only problem with this if you're trying to be a counter apologist. But there are archetypal stories, okay, that presuppose Jesus or predate Jesus, of central to a lot of religious ideation seems to be birth and resurrection, springtime, resurrection as transformation, things like that. And he's saying that there's a common archetypal pattern here that Jesus fits. Okay, that's a better argument than they were so traumatized that they I don't really understand why skeptics are jumping through hoops to try and disprove the resurrection to begin with. I think what Pinecreek said is the core of it. Pinecreek doesn't believe the Bible. So having something attested to as a miracle in the Bible is irrelevant to him. So I don't even see why he's bothering to try to debunk the resurrection. I guess he's trying to walk a Christian through. I guess what you're trying to accomplish, Pinecreek, is to show a Christian that his justification for the resurrection isn't predicated on enough for him to actually believe it. I guess that's the core point. But in order for that to be relevant, you have to actually deal with some of the real things that Christians believe that make a resurrection a lot easier to believe. If I have powerful religious experiences and I honestly think God has answered my prayer in other contexts, why is a resurrection any more implausible than that? It's not. It's not even close. Do you understand what I mean? I didn't say that all that well, but I think that's pretty clear. There are plenty of examples in my life where I've literally prayed and literally felt an answer, literally felt like I've gotten an answer. I understand you don't believe me, Pinecreek, but I believe that. Okay. That makes a resurrection, by definition, not implausible at all. That's why I don't even bother listening to the flying tortoise, the flying man. I don't even bother listening to it. I don't care. It's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. It's not why I became a Christian. I became a Christian because I had a powerful and compelling religious experience. And I could teach anybody listening to me, any atheist listening to me, if they followed the instructions carefully, how to have a powerful and compelling religious experience themselves. And yeah, you could say, well, it's all subconscious mind. I could very easily explain it that way too. And I grant you full permission to do that. The only thing I've ever offered is that when you have powerful, compelling religious experiences all the time, they don't feel like your subconscious mind. They don't even come close. They feel like you're actually in contact with, the presence of God. It's what it literally feels like. I could teach any atheist how to have that experience. And there's a tried and true methodology to it. It's really easy to accomplish and do. Anyone wants, one atheist took me up on it 2 years ago. That's why I started talking about, what's the freaking Schellenberg hiddenness of God argument? Non-resistant non-belief. Okay, Pinecreek, you are absolutely resistant to Christianity. Absolutely case closed resistant. You spend morning, noon, and night trying to wake up and try to debunk Christianity. You are 100% resistant. You aren't even close to non-resistant. The people who I said who are non-resistant are Answers from Reason crew. There's such a thing as a non-resistant atheist. It's them. I hang out with them. They don't run plays on me at all. They don't try to debunk me at all. They don't say, why do you believe these crazy things? Crazy. They don't waste any time. And they're probably more confident ultimately in their position than Pinecreek Doug. Why? Because they don't waste any, they don't care. They don't waste time trying to show me that I shouldn't believe what I believe. Why? Because I'm no threat to them. The only reason, I don't understand why Pinecreek is doing this. If we're no threat to you at all, Pinecreek, what do you care? Why do you want to debunk? You don't believe in the resurrection? Fine, sue yourself. But why are you wasting time going through the motions? Most of the people you run this play on don't really have compelling, powerful religious beliefs. There aren't these fire-breathing apologists, excepting maybe Habermas thinks he is. Or who is that? The Habermas? Is that the minimal facts? Who's the guy who you did the minimal facts to? Did he run the Pinecreek? Did you run the flying man on him? I don't remember. Probably didn't want you to.
Metaphysics? This is what happened. He died.
So this Camille Gregor interpretation is a lot more plausible. I think personally, it's an archetypal pattern or some type of thing common to religious ideation, common to religious experience. There's a lot of truth in that. Hello, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. That's why there are saviors and resurrected figures and all sorts of, Orpheus going into the underworld, somewhat Christ-like. There's a lot of Christ-like symbolic religious ideation out there. So I find his interpretation a lot better, firmer ground than they were traumatized.
And instead of going through the normal afterlife that other people go through, he was taken to heaven in the presence of God, and he was exalted, and he achieved some kind of higher metaphysical status that's not available for normal people. And then he made himself known to specific individuals on Earth. Now, if you think about, like, is this something unusual?
I lost the thread. Is he talking about Jesus in that, or was that some similar Christ-like entity or person?
Given religious thinking at the time? No, that's actually perfectly normal, right? That's not even unusual. And there are like dozens and dozens of examples of people about whom the exact same story was being told. And there are entire classes of people, right? Like some of them died.
Like who?
Some of the, well, for example, an entire category of people are people who were believed to disappear in rivers, right? So you drown, for example, or you just disappear in a river, and then you are deified. You are literally worshipped as a deity, right?
Right. So I lost. He's going weird with this. The original thing that I thought he was arguing is a lot firmer ground than what he's arguing. I guess people died and resurrected, whatever. The idea that this is an archetypal pattern common to many different types of religions and mythologies is essentially correct. Just a couple I know off the top of my head. Who Orpheus descends into the underworld. Is he a savior? Probably not, but there's some sort of common parallels. There's a lot of stories of death and resurrection, springtime as resurrection, things like that. I don't know what he's specifically talking about now with people drowning in rivers. It sounds weird.
And the rationale behind it is that your disappearance from Earth, so the fact that there isn't a body to bury, was an indication that actually you didn't just normally die as a person, that you became a divine being, worthy of worship, and that there needs to be a cult set up in your name. And you need to have devotees that are going to, sing hymns in your praise, that are going to sacrifice to you.
But do you have a specific name?
Another my favorite example is a guy named Cleomenes of Astipalaya, who was an Olympic boxer, and he was unfairly disqualified from a fight. And he was so angry that he pulled down a pillar, and that's caused a roof of a school to collapse, and it crushed 60 kids to death. And he was being chased by a mob that tried to stone him, and he ran into a sanctuary of Athena, and he hid in a chest. And when the people opened the chest, he disappeared. They found out he's not there. He's gone. So they asked the oracle at Delphi, like, what's going on? And the oracle said, know this, he was the last hero, Heros, that's like a semi-divine demigod, basically, like a special category of a person. And you need to set up a cult in his name, because he's like the last person in history that was made immortal. That's pretty similar, right? There are wise men, philosophers that were believed to be deified after they died. Roman emperors were believed to be deified.
Right. Okay. So long way of saying a pretty common religious idea at the time.
Rulers of Rome, starting with Romulus. So what, for example, Romans believed happened to Julius Caesar after he died.
All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little. We get it. Let's go. Let's see if what's his face shows up.
Sure. And that specific point in time, because that was very, very common.
Wow, I skipped ahead about 5 minutes and he's still on.
Yeah, I just think it's so difficult for the average Christian to wrap their mind around. We have so much detail in the Gospels, so much of these undesigned coincidences, that this cannot be like the stories you're talking about, Camille.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think the big difference is that, like, when people
Right. See, that's probably why Pinecreek runs this flying man, and I guess that answers the question as to why he cares, because he listens to too many Christian apologetics. So he obsesses on, let me debunk people like Lydia McGrew or whatever. That's why he's making analogies that aren't properly analogous. He doesn't actually think about religion simpliciter, theism in general. He doesn't actually think about people's beliefs and how they're formed and why they believe it. He listens to apologetics and he thinks of counter apologetics. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but ultimately you're going to have to go deeper, Pinecreek, think bigger. Camille's argument, it's okay. It's a little bit better. It's archetypal pattern, if you're a Christian, you don't have to think of counter arguments to everything that an atheist says. That's the point. If they don't believe in the resurrection, okay, you don't believe in the resurrection, wouldn't expect you to. If you're going to try to convince an atheist, really honestly wouldn't expect you to at all. So, that's why I don't think this is even necessarily fruitful terrain for the Christian. I think this is like, you're trying to convince somebody of the centerpiece miracle of Christianity. And, the evidence you're using is a book that they don't believe in. Okay. And if they agree with you, you gotta do a Trent Horn versus Pinecreek. Here's the evidence. You got to do that every once in a while. But I don't think this is fruitful terrain for the Christian in terms of convincing an atheist. I really don't. You could see what look at the two counter narratives, trauma and archetypal patterns. And those are 100 times more plausible to every atheist listening than rising from the dead. Are those well thought out, well constructed counter narratives? Yeah, they're okay. They're 100 times more plausible to the audience. You see the issue here. If you're a Christian,
think about it, they think about it in terms of how plausible it is that someone would believe something like that today. And it's like, fair enough, it's not very plausible. It's like,
even different from that though, because I think when I recall back to just 2 or 3 years ago, reading the Bible versus reading some other contemporary book that might contain like contemporaneous with the Bible that might contain like crazy claims, right? It was just that the Bible was special to me. Like my critical thinking skills would be there. If I read some of the book that said a guy rose from the dead or something and it wasn't Jesus, I would just have thought, obviously not, like that's stupid.
Okay, so that's actually a halfway decent point that Pinecreek doesn't account for in his analogy. The Christian religion is sacred to the Christian. The Bible is sacred to the Christian. It's not to the atheists. It's sacred terrain. There are, to understand the emotion, you can instigate it in yourself as an atheist if you so choose. Pick the most beautiful church in the world, like St. Mary's in Poland, St. Mary's Basilica. And, imagine yourself standing in the Cologne Cathedral and the overwhelming majesty of the architecture. And they literally designed it to instigate a sense of reverential awe in you, the person. Imagine being overwhelmed by those aesthetics and then understand that deep emotional resonance to Christianity. It's not present with all Christians. Okay, that's why this is irrelevant a lot of times, because a lot of the times he shoots at things that isn't really the thing that the Christian in front of him cares about or resonates with. He does that a lot, actually. He moves them to the things he wants to talk about, not what the actual Christian is really basing their faith on. He almost routinely does that. I was there to talk about religious experiences because that's what's central to my Christian faith. Okay, he didn't want to talk about them at all. And he didn't really ask me any real questions about them. Why? Because, he's not really interested. I wasn't really interested. He's trying to score a play. Craig, shut up, man. Shut up about your religious experience. I'm trying to score a fake play. He's trying to put fake points on the board for atheism. Why? I don't know. Honestly, he needs to be psychologized. Paul G says you're not allowed to psychologize. Paul G, he does it every single day. He's psychologist 10 times a day, all the time. Why does he care so much about deep? I don't know. It's a really weird open question. And so far, I don't have the answer. But his answer, oh, he just do it for fun. Wrong. I knew it. Nope. You are way too committed to it to just for fun.
That's just obviously false. I just didn't care for being.
So what Nathan was about to say is more important than it's decent insight. The Bible is sacred to the Christians, even me, who's not necessarily Bible literalist. The Bible is somewhat sacred, special place of reverence in my heart and mind. Okay, some authority over me. If I read a scripture in the Bible and it says, love your neighbor as yourself, I try to embody and live it out. That's important. That's important. And that can't be communicated to Pinecreek Doug. Why? Because that's not standard evidentiary warrant. Okay, that's a deeply subjective thing. And that's part of why he's not very good at counterapologetics. Why? Because he never delves into that, the real heart of the matter, the real emotional core of why people actually believe religion. He doesn't investigate that at all. He believes the farce that it's all about, evidentiary warrants and justifications. Stuff's okay up to a point, but that ain't the real heart of the matter.
Consistent, like the Bible was just special.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that's a good point, right? That's probably true as well. But what I wanted to say is, yeah, when people think about it, they probably think about it in terms of how plausible it is that someone would become convinced of this today if it didn't happen. And sometimes we see similar claims being made even today, but I think the probability is very low, right? Like when I die, the probability that someone's going to think that I've been raised from the dead bodily after 3 days is not going to be very high, right?
Yes, probably.
Unless my devious plan comes into fruition that I'm setting up. But anyway, but I think that
that's pretty interesting. I'd like to hear more about that devious plan. I don't know.
That's not a very good way to think about it. You have to think about how plausible it is that someone would come with it like in the first century Mediterranean. And the reason why people don't think about that is because most people know fuck all about how people were thinking back then,
The McGrews have just stopped watching.
Yeah.
You said.
Is he right? Were the McGrews watching? Interesting. By the way, what's fun about this original, you should go watch their original thing. Analyze it, because I'm pretty sure Pinecreek was in the live chat. For some reason, the live chat wasn't playing when I watched it.
The F word.
Too bad.
But the last 15 minutes that this discussion, you should clip, Nathan. It's probably the most important discussion on Christianity ever done on YouTube.
Okay.
What? Where? Why? Who? What? When? What was?
Maybe I'll do so. I mean, I'm going to London tomorrow, so.
Did he mean that facetiously? Because I think I played the last 15 minutes. I've been streaming this for almost an hour. I'm doing this way too slow. I apologize. I get talking. I talk. It's part of the joy of being me. But I think I played the last 15 minutes. Did I miss? Did he mean that facetiously?
And I think there's also one important reason, and it's that it's a question of genre, right? So I think the reason why people think that the Gospels are special is because Gospels, some of them more than others, were written in the genre of history or like biography. So the authors were trying to make it sound believable. And I think they succeeded, actually. And it doesn't mean that because they wrote in the genre of biography that they were trying to make other people believe it. Because we have other examples of ancient mythology that was also written in the genre of historiography, right? It was completely normal. One of the things that you could have done as an author is to write mythology as if you were writing history. But the problem is that with a lot of these different figures, the myths, even though, again, the metaphysics is very, very similar, I would say basically the same, it's written in different kinds of texts. It's written, for example, in poetry, in drama, in paradoxography and stuff like that. So when a Christian is thinking about it, he's going to say, yeah, but it doesn't have undesigned coincidences. It doesn't give like these historical details that we can verify. It's not accurate when it comes to dating. The stories are told centuries after they supposedly happen, and not just like one generation.
Okay, so that's probably a reasonably good point. What I think he meant is that some of the metaphysics and the archetypal patterns are similar in other mythologies or religions, but they aren't written as if they're historical narrative telling a tale that's, supposedly Jesus was born here and such a date, and then he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. So they're mythopoetic, but they're told as, I've read the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavad Gita has really some good stuff in it. I don't remember. He's probably right with the Bhagavad Gita, I think, but he's definitely right about some things that aren't being told. So everyone clear on what he means. It's a halfway decent point. The Gospels, at least the part we're talking about here under discussion, is written as if it's a real story in time and place, even though there are elements of metaphysics and mythopoetic poetry, and they are embedded in the real story, theological constructs and argumentation and symbolic language and things like that, which I think are the real substance of the story. But so he's saying that's different than, so a Christian will go, well, look, this really happened, and that's just poetry
later and stuff like that. But for me, first of all, that's completely expected on like if my hypothesis is actually true. And also that's just completely uninteresting, right? What I think is the interesting consideration is that the set of ideas that are being told, or the set of beliefs that are being believed about Jesus by earliest Christians, exactly the kind of thing that you would expect coming from exactly that kind of environment,
culture and time.
Yeah. And I don't know that much about like ancient China or Mesoamerica, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that actually, those people had very different religious beliefs at the time that were not conducive to generating these kinds of metaphysics, right?
Yeah, but a priori, Camille, a priori, the idea that God would have to die for our sins is very, very high. Has a really high price.
Yeah, that's why every religion has a story like that, right? How they always say, every religion has a flood story, therefore there probably was a flood. Well, turns out not every religion has a...
Camille, there's some wavering atheists listening right now, and they're listening to you, and they feel really confident now that atheism is true after hearing what you said. They're former Christians, and they just want to make sure that they made the right choice leaving Christianity. But I fear they're going to go to McClatchy's channel, the McGrew's channel, Caption Christianity's channel, and everything you've said is going to be undone. So I strongly suggest no atheists listen to those Christian channels. Please, you need more grounding first. And just
I can even recommend...
What a strange... I guess that's a joke. What a strange joke. I don't really get it. What was he saying?
Some thick books for people if they want to, become even more secure in their belief. Because I'm not the only...
I don't know. That totally went over my head. Was he saying that that's what what was he saying that what he said was so obviously true? I don't know. I didn't get it, Doug. I'm sure it was funny, but I didn't get it. I can't process it.
I'm obviously not the first one who proposes this, right? It's been circulating in literature. It's just I've read a couple of books about it, and yeah, it's never really appreciated that this is something that not even New Testament scholars, for example, really think about it. It's just because it's described as a resurrection. When you are looking for parallels in Jewish culture or Greco-Roman culture, basically start by doing a word study on the word resurrection. And lo and behold, you'll find out that nobody's really using the same terminology, for example, in Greek mythology. So you say, okay, well, there can't be any influence, right? Or that there wasn't a common background. But what you need to do instead of studying the word usage and the terminology that's being used, you have to study the actual ideas, right? The theology, the metaphysics, what's actually going on with Jesus, right?
Because
he's
Russian
not
there
like
for a second. The ideas.
yeah, he's not like the 10-year-old kids that are being raised in Africa today. That's
But
not
isn't-
the best parallel.
Isn't the Greek term, Camille? Isn't the Greek term Christos anesti, right? So what if you look up anesti?
All right, so it's been almost an hour. This was fun. I can't believe they went on to do 4 more hours of this. I'm going to put it away for now. Wifey's going to be home any minute. I got to go on my walk. So, I mean, the core takeaway, which they didn't really get into analyzing the flying man. The flying man, there's a couple of things that they touched on that I somewhat agree with. The emotional resonance of Christianity is really important to people who actually, really care about Christianity. It's an obvious statement. And the thing that produces the belief in the resurrection is not plugged in. It is not properly analogous. It is not plugged into the flying man. You've been listening to too many counter apologists or too many apologists who tell you, I guess these guys know the apologists, like the McGrews and those arguments of undesigned coincidence and things like that a lot better than I do. I don't pay attention to any of that. But Pinecreek has fallen into the trap of thinking, and I guess that's why atheists find it convincing, because they pay attention to some of that stuff. I don't pay attention to it at all. It's not what produces the idea. Think of it this way. I've explained it in other videos. This remains 100% true. There are 1 billion people, more than 1 billion Christians worldwide. A resurrection, by definition, is more plausible, because entailed in the definition of plausibility is how easy is it for people to believe, than atheism. However you want to slice that, your head can fall off when you hear that, but that's the God's honest truth. And if you actually care about scoring points for atheism, not fake ones, you need to really analyze the why. And the why starts with the fact that every Christian presupposes a God for whom raising someone from the dead isn't all that wildly implausible. It's, to an atheist, it's every bit as implausible as me praying right now, let my wife come home. Don't let my wife come home right away. Let her come home an hour later, or let her start dinner early. Let dinner be good tonight. Like, I can actually affect by prayer the course of the meal, meaning the being that I'm calling on who would do that. Almost any Christian prayer prays presupposes a being of unfathomable power. And every Christian, to one degree or another, when their son gets hit by a car, calls on God, gets on their face and starts crying out to God. And, they will even get answers. The phone will ring. Wife will go, "We found the best doctor." The Christian will even go, "Oh, thank God," and not connect the dots. Oh, thank God. After they prayed. Now, when the part where this gets weird to me is I don't know what type of Christian Pinecreek was. I don't imagine he had any answered prayers when he was a Christian. But John Steingrad, for example, who talks about the hiddenness of God, was a Christian pretty much the same way I'm a Christian. Same basic Christian type of Christian. Wasn't there times when his bus broke down and him and his bandmates prayed and just called on God, and didn't they get tripped out because the guy showed up 20 minutes later, and you're like, how did that happen? Because that's happened to me thousands of times. I mean, I can't believe that didn't happen to John Steingrad. Didn't that happen to you, John Steingrad? Weren't there times where you and your friends prayed and you were like, wow, I can't believe. I know secular people who had really, really weird answered prayers. My friend Brendan got hit by a D train. He was paralyzed, still paralyzed to this day. and he's not a believer, but he's nominally Catholic, was raised Catholic, and he went to talk to some Roman Catholic priest, but just because he was despairing and what had happened to his life. And the priest asked him, literally, is there anything you want me to pray for? And he said, somewhat sardonically, as Brendan would do, he's a very sardonic guy, could you get me a rent-controlled apartment in New York? And guess what he got? It's a rent-controlled apartment in New York. Now, of course, they just go, oh, just a coincidence. It's a pretty big coincidence, would you say? Yeah, I'm not saying, I didn't say that happened to me. I said that happened to a friend of mine who wasn't a Christian. There are thousands of people who have answered prayers like that. Now, I'm not saying you, an atheist, will believe that as a testimony. I'm not saying you, an atheist, is going to hear that and find that convincing. That guy, Brendan, I don't think he's a Christian. He's still my friend. I still chat with him every once in a while. He's a really smart guy. He writes for the New York Times, and I'm just saying, I could tell you 5,000 stories like that, 50 stories, and everyone I know in church, every person I know in church has stories like that. Didn't you, when you were a Christian, if you're an atheist who deconverted, didn't you have stories like that when you were a Christian? Didn't you have experiences where you actually like, whoa, that's weird? Was that God? And every hair in your arm stood up and you went, whoa, that's really weird. That's exactly what I asked for. That didn't happen to you? That seems strange to me. It seems strange to me because that stuff happens in my church all the freaking time. Oh, it's normal. It's part and parcel of the Christian experience. I understand there are a lot of Christians for whom that doesn't happen, but that's why it trips me out with John Steingrad, because I'm pretty sure he's the same type of Christian that I was. I doubt that happened to Apologia because they probably discouraged it. They probably said, oh, that's the devil, Paul. That's the devil. I don't know. They probably had some weird, trippy, like guilt, shame thing to tell him not to believe in miracles or whatever. I have no idea. And probably for Pinecreek, he was a pretty tripped out Christian too. But for someone like John Steingrad, who was basically the same type of Christian I was, didn't that happen all the time? I don't get it. If it didn't happen, I don't get it. So there you have it, kids. That's why people believe in the centerpiece miracle of Christianity. Why? Because they believe in miracles. Hello? It's not that big of a leap of the imagination. If you already believe that you can call on God and he can answer you for mundane, everyday things, there would be enormous power to that being, that entity, when you call on him for mundane, everyday things. In order for him to give you a mundane answer to prayer, he'd have to be awesomely powerful beyond the scope of all human imagining. Ergo, a resurrection ain't that big of a deal. It's not that astronomically implausible. It's really not. It's pretty normal part of Christianity. That's why the flying man fails. It sucks. It really does. It really does kind of suck, though, Pinecreek, because you're not plugging in the thing that is actually analogous to the awesome power of God that the Christian believes. That's the thing that the Christian believes that makes the resurrection plausible. And you don't plug it into the analogy. At least the last time I heard you didn't. You act like the thing that makes it plausible is, this sentence written in the book, and then you take that sentence away and put this sentence in. Maybe Christians play along with you because they don't understand their own belief system. Did you ever think of that? That's why a lot of your question and answer sections are gimmicky and beside the point. Why? Because you don't actually explore what really is at issue here. What is really making somebody believe something that you find implausible? You never really examine it honestly, never really pick into it. You only examine to debunk. Find the thing that you think is wildly implausible and try and the Christian doesn't really believe that particular thing all that strongly either. And then you go with that. Why? Because that's the thing that the Christian doesn't really hold to all that strongly. That's what you do every single time. You move the person to the least plausible thing, not only for you, but for them. And you usually spend time asking the person to find it. Easily done. Easily done. Nothing up your sleeve. Nothing to see. It's gimmicky. It works. But that's why I stopped watching. It's a shorten your methodology when you were in a debate with Trent Horn. Did you feel like you scored a lot of points with Trent Horn? Did you feel like people deconverted when they watched? Because they didn't. They didn't. Your audience cheers it on. Think of it this way, Pinecreek Doug. You're somewhat of a conservative, right? Imagine you're in a debate with a Democrat And the Democrat gets to ask all the questions. Who's going to win the debate? The Democrat. How's he going to win the debate? Same way you do. He's going to lead you to all of the weak parts of your worldview. Okay, explain January 6th, explain Trump's tweets, and then you don't get to ask any questions in return. Guess who's going to win the debate? Him. Does it mean all of a sudden he's right? No. Does it mean you're right about atheism? No. If you're right, stop cheating. Stop cheating. Stop. It's worse than straw manning. You're actually, setting up somebody to go to their weakest possible justification and their weakest possible thing they believe after asking them, after investigating. It's worse than, it's like straw manning on steroids. If you really don't believe in God, play fair every single solitary time, and you'll see. Because I think you believe in God more than you say you do. Why? Because you wouldn't be bending over backwards to prove it all false if you didn't. Basic psychology of humans. I don't believe you find it all so wildly implausible. I don't believe you at all. I'm very skeptical of that. I think the Answers and Reason crew are more firmly committed, resolute atheists than you. Why? Because they don't do any of this junk. They don't waste any time asking people about resurrections or any of this garbage. Why? Because they honestly don't believe it. So they don't feel compelled to try and prove it false every single day of their waking hour of their life. The fact that you feel compelled to try and prove it false every single hour of your waking life bespeaks the opposite of confidence, whether you want to acknowledge that and clearly see that or not. It is not what a confident person totally, really, really resolute in their opinion does. I am 100% resolute in my belief about God. 100%. Do you see me doing that to atheists ever? The answer would be no. Even when I have atheists on my channel, do I ask them challenging questions? The answer is no. Why? Because I'm not interested in debunking them. I know what I believe. I'm interested in how they came to believe something, especially if I think they're intelligent and credible, a la Apologia or Drew, who I found honest, intelligent, and credible. How do they hold a position that I think is really obviously false? And I get it. I learned how they hold to the position. If I were raised the way they were raised, I'd probably wind up an atheist too, or at least something close. I'd wind up some sort of agnostic. Why? Because they were raised in trippy, weirdo versions of Christianity. That's why. It makes sense to me that they want to reject what they were raised in. Why? Because what they were raised in was weird. And probably yours too. I don't know the basics. I get some idea that it was a trippy, freaky version of Christianity that was probably deeply unhealthy. I get that. Okay, not every version of Christianity out there is toxic. Not every version of Christianity out there needs to be resisted so stridently. It's idiotic. Idiotic. And you are not conquering the ontology by moving to the least plausible aspects of Christianity. And as far as the resurrection go, I wouldn't expect any atheist to believe in a resurrection. That's the last thing an atheist will believe. Atheist starts heading towards God usually because of emotional resonance first. The value system of Christianity starts to speak to them, like Philip Goff, starting to trend towards Christianity. Why? Because they respect the values. They like what Christianity produces in other human beings. Hey, that guy's a good guy. What's his deal? He's a Christian. Aha. I like what he is. That's why they start trending towards Christianity, because it produces something good and worthy in another person, and they recognize that. They don't trend towards Christianity because they believe in a resurrection. It's ridiculous. I don't even know who that's directed at. It's not. That's the last thing a Christian believes. An atheist is going to believe about Christianity. The last thing. The first thing they're going to say is, "Look, that guy's peace of mind, and he's a really decent guy, and it looks like that's predicated on his Christian beliefs." I respect that. That's the first thing they're going to think. That's the real thing. They see that. They see your good works and they praise your Father who is in heaven. They go, wow, Craig Reed is a really good guy. It's got to be because he's a Christian. Why? Because there's no other explanation other than that he's a doofus. Other than that, he's a full-on clown. So anyways, all right. And thus ended the rant. It was not quite as fun as I thought it was going to be, but, one for the books, one for the record books. Will I ever think about the Flying Man again? I don't know. It's got to be made properly analogous, my friend Pinecreek. That's not optional. You seem to think it's optional. It's not. And with that, I will go. Wifey has called. Mass is ended. Go in peace. With that, I will end. Mass is ended. Go in peace.